Fellas, the UFC have gone pretty global these past few years. I mean, we've got champions from all over the world as of right now. So I'm going to do, what if every country in the UFC had a pound-for-pound ranking? So making a pound-for-pound ranking for multiple different countries that compete in the UFC, the fighters from each country, just to see who the best fighters from each country are. And we'll start off with USA. USA, probably the biggest or the most populated country when it comes to UFC fighters. At number 10, I'm going to go with Buckley. I think Buckley this year especially has definitely pushed himself to be one of the best American fighters in the UFC. This dude went from a journeyman in the middleweight division, not really doing anything with his career. A couple of losses and he could have been cut from the sport, and now he's one of the best American fighters. I mean, 4 ranked wins in 2024. I think he's one of the best fighters of 2024. Top 5 fighter of the year. Ranked number 6 in the welterweight division. 2024 fighter of the year contender, like I said. He's on a 6-fight winning streak ever since coming down to the welterweight division. He's completely punched his ticket in the welterweight division. I mean, this year alone, finishing Vicente Luque, I think he was an underdog, a massive underdog in this fight. Finishing Vicente Luque, destroying Colby Covington on the feet in a Fight Night main event, knocking out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, beating Ruziboyev. I think Ruziboyev might have been a favourite as well at that moment in time in the co-main event of UFC St. Louis. He's become one of the most, well, he's just completely made his career in the year of 2024, and I think we give him his respect as the 10th best American fighter right now. Buckley at number 10 for USA. Next fighter we've got Brandon Royval. Might be quite underrated on the pound-for-pound list. I won't say Brandon Royval's top 15 or top 20 pound-for-pound, but if you're going to do a top 30 pound-for-pound list, I don't mind Brandon Royval being on that. He's won 5 of his last 6 fights. He's done a pretty good job at clearing out, maybe not clearing out, but doing a good job at beating a lot of these flyweights. He's the number 1 ranked flyweight in the world. A lot of people forget that he's ranked above Moreno. He beat Moreno this year. He's only lost in his UFC career as well to Pantoja, the champion himself, who's beaten everyone, and Brandon Moreno, who he's now 1-1 against. And he's beat a bunch of ranked contenders as well as Brandon Royval. He's going to be taking on Manel Kape. Can't wait for that fight. And if he beats Manel Kape, without a doubt, he's going to be fighting for a belt in his next fight. So I'm going to go with Brandon Royval. If Pantoja didn't exist, he'd be the best flyweight in the world. He's only lost to Moreno and Pantoja, 1-1 against Brandon Moreno. So I'm going to say Brandon Royval, permanent top contender, always been number 1 or number 2 in the division, is the 9th best fighter from America in the UFC. The next fighter we've got is Justin Gaethje. You've got to include Justin Gaethje in this list. I mean, this dude has beat a bunch of contenders from multiple different years. He's fought the who's who's. He fought Tony Ferguson, ended the winning streak of Tony Ferguson. That historical fight with Michael Johnson, knocked out Dustin Poirier recently. Wins over Rafael Fiziev, these up-and-comers. So many good wins as Justin Gaethje got in the UFC. In one of the most competitive divisions. He's currently ranked number 3 in the sport. And let's be honest, if he could have got a title shot, if he'd have rejected that fight with Max Holloway, because he's already beaten and knocked out Poirier and beat Fiziev, he could have made a case to say that he deserved the title shot. He's a former BMF champion. I know that's not the biggest accomplishment. The BMF champion is kind of just a champion for people who can't become undisputed, but it's still something to, brag that he beat Dustin Poirier. And like I said, he just beat a bunch of ranked contenders. Even currently in the rankings, he's got a bunch of wins. So Justin Gaethje, I'm going to say he's the 8th best American fighter in the UFC. Great resume, great career. Probably pound for pound the most entertaining fighter in the UFC. So at number 8, I'm going to go Gaethje. Number 7, I'm going Corey Sandhagen. Probably one of the most skilled, if not the most skilled or high-level fighter in the UFC. I mean, bantamweight is the most competitive division in the UFC. So for Corey Sandhagen to be a top contender for the longest time in the bantamweight division is impressive. Like I said, I think he's one of the most skilled fighters in the UFC. He's got great wrestling, great takedown defense. Obviously, he fought Umar Nurmagomedov, who's one of the best wrestlers in the bantamweight division, defended a bunch of takedowns there. His striking is on a completely different level. One of the best strikers in this division. One of the most well-rounded fighters. He's ranked number 4th, but I'd say, again, 2 fights away from a title shot. I know that's easier said than done, but he's only lost to top contenders as well. You look at his past couple of losses. He lost to Umar Nurmagomedov, who's going to be fighting for a belt. He lost to PTN a few years ago, and that was a very, close fight, and that was when PTN was deemed as number 1 in the world, because obviously he lost to Sterling, but it was a DQ loss. He's lost to Aljamain Sterling as well before. Well, again, Sterling's went on to become a champion. So I'm going to go Corey Sandhagen, number 7. Again, he's in the most competitive division in the UFC. One of the most skilled fighters. Only lost to top contenders. So number 7, I'm going Sandhagen. Number 6, I'm going Sean Strickland. If we're doing a pound-for-pound list right now, Strickland is one of the best, one of the best in America. He's in the pound-for-pound top 15. I think he's ranked number 14th pound-for-pound. Former champion, the only former champion on this list so far, and he's going to be fighting for a belt in his next fight, so he could go out there and beat Dricus du Plessis. I personally don't think he will, but you never know. He has got the belt. He's got a solid resume as well in the middleweight division. If you look at the middleweight rankings, he's beaten quite a few names. Obviously got the historical win of Israel Adesanya, which is his biggest win, but just his middleweight resume, he's beaten a bunch of contenders in the middleweight division. Ranked number 1 in the division, so on paper at least is the 2nd best middleweight, even though we all know it's Chimaev. Defensively very sound. Only a few losses in the middleweight division to the absolute best. So Sean Strickland, I'm going to say he's number 6 as the best pound-for-pound American. At number 5, first guy making the top 5 is Dustin Poirier. I know this is a pound-for-pound list, not a legacy list, but I think it would be dumb to say that Dustin Poirier isn't the greatest non-champion in the UFC. I mean, he has fought so many killers throughout his career. If you go and look at Dustin Poirier's career, he's constantly fighting killers, whether it be up-and-comers like Benoit Saint Denis, whether it be legends like Justin Gaethje, whether it be guys like Max Holloway moving up a division, whatever it may be. Dustin Poirier, he's probably got one of the best resumes when it comes to elite competition. He's fought the best of the best. He's always been a top contender in the lightweight division, ranked number 4th, just fought for the belt in a competitive fight against pound-for-pound number 1. Dustin Poirier, in my opinion, the greatest non-champion in the UFC, one of the best lightweights and always has been, and I'm going to put him at number 5 as the 5th best American fighter in the UFC. At number 4, I'm going Sean O'Malley. Again, former champion in the most competitive weight class in the UFC. I think Sean O'Malley, he gets disrespected quite a lot by MMA fans. That win over PT I'm pretty sure he was a huge underdog going to that fight with PT because most people thought Yan was going to smoke him. He beats PT, fair enough, it was a controversial fight, but the fact that it was competitive was impressive for O'Malley. Then he goes out there and knocks out Aljamain Sterling, then he beats the brakes off of Marlon Vera, and then loses, but it wasn't as, he wasn't as dominantly as PT lost to Merab. So, former champion in the most competitive division, ranked number 1 in the bantamweight division, one of the best strikers and most fluid strikers in the UFC, probably one of my favourites to watch, and he's only got one legit UFC loss against the champion. Obviously, he lost to Marlon Vera via injury, but if you take away that, his only loss is to Merab, who's smoking every bantamweight nowadays. So, Sean O'Malley, feel like he's a little bit underrated, not underrated, but underappreciated in the bantamweight division. I'm putting him at number 4. At number 3, I'm going Max Holloway, the Hawaiian champion from USA, Max Holloway, former featherweight champion. And he did a good job at being the featherweight champion. He would have been a featherweight champion for much longer had Alexander Volkanovski not existed. Current BMF champion, again, maybe not the best credential to have, but it's still something he can, say that he knocked out Justin Gaethje. He has an insane resume as well. We talk about Dustin Poirier having a great resume. Well, so does Max Holloway. Between two extremely competitive divisions, the lightweight division, the featherweight division, always been the top contender. We always said when Volkanovski was the champion that Max Holloway was always the number 1 guy behind Volkanovski. He was beating every contender. Yair Rodriguez, the fight with Calvin Kattar, Korean Zombie, Arnold Allen. This dude's featherweight legacy just goes on for the longest time, knocking out Justin Gaethje at UFC 300 as well. Number 3, I'm going Max Holloway, been one of the best, also in the pound-for-pound list too. At number 2 is the second best American fighter. I'm going with Belal Muhammad. Now, I know he likes to represent different countries and everything, but technically he is from the USA. And you've got to include Belal Muhammad. He's the only champion so far. Well, he's the only guy on this list so far that's actually a champion, the current welterweight champion. He's already got an amazing welterweight resume. I think he's got an underrated resume. People like to talk about how Merab's got an underrated resume in the bantamweight division. Well, I'd say that Belal has an underrated resume in the welterweight division. I mean, you look at the guys he's beaten. Vicente Luque, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Sean Brady, who's now top 5, Gilbert Burns, when Burns was a top contender coming off a few wins, beat the brakes off him, but dominated Leon Edwards, so he's already got an amazing welterweight resume, pound for pound top 5 in the UFC, and he looks unstoppable in the welterweight division. I'm not saying he's necessarily unbeatable, but there isn't a single fighter I would look at welterweight right now and confidently pick above Belal Muhammad. So at number 2, I'm going to go with Belal. At number 1, it's got to be John Jones. I know there's a lot of disrespect to John Jones, and it's rightfully so. He's someone that deserves to be disrespected. But if we're being real, he is the best American fighter right now. I mean, as the current heavyweight champion, it is disputed, but he is the current champion in the UFC. Hopefully we see him versus Aspinall. The greatest of all time, at least on my list. I know, again, it's a controversial take nowadays to put Jones as the GOAT, but I would put him at number 1. He's beaten everyone he's been put against, despite the controversy. I would say, at least on paper, he's beat everyone. Obviously, you can say that Ray has beat him, and I agree with that, but on paper, at least, he's beaten everyone, and he is technically, like I said, undefeated in the UFC. You've got to put John Jones as number 1 right now. He could beat Tom Aspinall as well, which would be an extremely impressive win. I'm not going to give him credit for something he hasn't done, but he could go out there and beat Tom Aspinall. But this is my top 10 for the USA. The best American fighters in the UFC right now. Jones, I mean, like I said, he's pound for pound top 3 anyway. He's the best American fighter, followed by Belal and the rest of the list as it shows. So that is my USA list. Then we've got the UK. UK MMA has grown massively these past few years. I mean, UFC 3 or 4 in 2024. We've got UFC London in March. So UK MMA has grown massively. At number 10, I'm going to go with Paul Craig. I'm going to go Paul Craig at number 10. He's got amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's got the best BJJ in the UFC because he doesn't set up the submissions correctly. He kind of just lays on his back hoping that people are going to come in, and he's kind of been found out. But he has got amazing Jiu-Jitsu. And his resume as well. I mean, I know this is kind of all he's got going for him, but he's got wins over Magomed Ankalaev, the only guy to beat Ankalaev, Jamal Hill, Nikita Krylov. He's got a great resume against top light heavyweights. I mean, he was the only guy to beat Hill and Ankalaev for a while. He was ranked 2 fights ago as well, so he's a former ranked fighter. And he's been ranked in 2 weight classes. He was ranked in the top 10 in the light heavyweight division. He was ranked in the top 15 in the middleweight division. So I'll give my respect to Paul Craig. Maybe nowadays he's kind of fallen off, but at least what he's done and the resume that he's got, I'm going to put him at number 10 pound for the best British fighters. At number 9, I'm going Nathaniel Wood. He's just a scrapper, man. Super fun guy to watch. He's won 5 of his last 7 fights, and even one of those losses are controversial because he lost to Mohamed Naimov, and there was a bunch of cheating going on in that fight too, so you can even say that he won 5 of his last 6. One of the best unranked fighters in the featherweight division. If you were to do a top 5 list of the best unranked featherweights, I think Nathaniel Wood's got to be in that top 5. Very well-rounded, tough guy, comes to scrap. Has some good wins as well, like he beat Andre Philly a few years ago, I think it was last year, on the Aspinall Tabura card, where he beat Andre Philly in one of the best fights. He's got a pretty good resume. So Nathaniel Wood, I'm going to say he's number 9th as the 9th best British fighter. And number 8, I'm going Mick Parkin. Slick Mick Parkin, ranked number 15th. People like to talk about Tom Aspinall being hyped up. You should be giving your attention to Mick Parkin, ranked number 15th in the heavyweight division now. I know there's going to be guys who are unranked above Mick Parkin because it is the heavyweight division. It's probably the easiest division to become ranked in, but he's still ranked 4-0 in the UFC with a KO. I think he's got the biggest winning streak in the UFC right now in the heavyweight division. I don't think there's a single heavyweight with a winning streak longer than Mick Parkin. He's just come off a KO win, and he also got a finish on the Contender Series. Very well-rounded and balanced fighter. He's good everywhere as Mick Parkin. Good chin, good striking, good defense, good kickboxing, good grappling. Not necessarily elite anywhere, but he's just very well-rounded, and he's undefeated as well. So I'm going to go number 8, Mick Parkin. Number 7, Davy Grant. Probably the most underrated, or one of the most underrated British fighters right now. This dude's 38 years old, I'm pretty sure. Battering people. And I think, again, he's one of the best unranked bantamweights in the UFC. He has wins over Marlon Vera. He beat Jonathan Martinez. He's recently come off a win over Tavares as well. He should have beaten Adrian Yanez. We talk about these big prospects, or at least at the time, Adrian Yanez. He should have got the win over Adrian Yanez. He should have beaten Daniel Marcos, who is undefeated, and he's on a roll in the bantamweight division. So I think his resume is super impressive. 2 fights away from being ranked, if not 1. Davy Grant is going number 7. Overlooked as a British fighter, so I'm going to put, Davy Grant number 7. Number 6, MVP, Michael Venom Page. Now, he's only had 2 fights in the UFC, so it's kind of hard to gauge how he is compared to the rest of the guys on this list. But he's ranked in the welterweight division at number 15th. Beat Kevin Holland, which is a respectable winner. It's not like a top name, but he has beaten Kevin Holland. And he had a very close fight with Ian Gary. Ian Gary proved at UFC 310 that he's one of the best in the world, and he had a very close fight. A lot of people thought it was a robbery with Ian Gary. And I'd say he's one of the best strikers in the UFC right now. We all knew he was one of the best strikers coming into the UFC. Looked great against Kevin Holland. Looked good on the feet against Ian Gary. So MVP's going number 6. At number 5, Paddy Pimblett. I think Paddy Pimblett, it's kind of crazy how he's turned his career around. I remember when he started his UFC career, people were saying that he's never going to be anything crazy, never going to get ranked, he gets murked by any good fighter. But I think he's top 5 best British fighters. He's ranked 13th in one of the most competitive divisions in the UFC. He's got a very impressive finish over Bobby Green, where he completely just destroyed him. He mauled Tony Ferguson. I know he didn't get the finish, but he still mauled him. Undefeated in the UFC. I think he's 5-0 in the UFC as well. Pretty good record as well. He's only lost twice in his MMA career, I'm pretty sure. Quite powerful on the feet. Solid Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Has potential, not necessarily to become a top 5 fighter, but there's a lot of guys he could beat in the lightweight division. So Paddy Pimblett, I'm going to say, is the 5th best British fighter. I know a lot of people don't want to give him credit because of his personality and his weird style, but I think we've got to give him credit. Number 5. At number 4, I'm going Lerone Murphy, another one of the most underrated British fighters. And you didn't know Lerone Murphy was next, probably because you forgot who Lerone Murphy was. But ranked number 11th in the featherweight division, which is, quite impressive considering it's, again, one of the most competitive divisions. He's had a war with Edson Barboza where he beat him. Well, he kind of battered Edson Barboza. He got dropped and nearly finished by Dan Ige just to make a huge comeback and beat Dan Ige as well. So he's got 2 ranked wins. Undefeated as well, never lost a fight. And he's a very tough guy, Lerone Murphy. He's been through some absolute scraps and one of the most well-rounded featherweights right now. He came from like this heavy grappling background, and recently he's been toning up his striking, outstriking Dan Ige in the 3rd round, outstriking Edson Barboza, a great kickboxer. So Lerone Murphy, I honestly think he has potential to become a top contender in the featherweight division. So number 4 is Lerone Murphy. Number 3, I'm going Arnold Allen, the slightly better British featherweight. Ranked number 7th in the featherweight division. His only UFC losses are to Max Holloway, who's one of the best, and even that was quite a good performance, and Evloev in a very controversial fight. So he did very well in both of those fights. He's got 4 ranked wins, including a finish over Dan Hooker. Obviously beat Sadiq Youssef, beat Calvin Kattar, even though there's some controversy, beat Giga Chikadze as well. And he's still got champion contender material. Listen, if Topuria moves up and Volkanovski retires, I know that's a very what-if kind of moment, but Arnold Allen's got a lot of potential to be a champion material fighter. He's well-rounded, he's got a decent chin, scrappy. So Arnold Allen, I'm going number 3, is the 3rd best British fighter. Still a top contender. Number 2, it's got to be Leon Edwards. Has definitely fallen off and become a bit unforgettable, but he's ranked number 1 in the welterweight division, obviously a former champion. And he's got a former top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. I think he's one of the only British fighters to make it to the top 5 in pound-for-pound. Still ranked top 15 as well. in the pound for pound list, and he beat the pound for pound king Usman twice. You know, if we're going to talk about a pound for pound list of British fighters, I think you've got to give Leon Edwards his credit. Knocking out Usman and then beating him by decision, beating Colby Covington. Fair enough, it was a bit of a wash, Covington. But, you know, Leon Edwards, I'm going to give him number 2. Former champion, still one of the best welterweights in the world, even though we got dominated by Bilal. And number 1 has to be Tom Aspinall. He is the face of UK MMA in 2025. You know, he's the real champion in the heavyweight division. Most people would count Tom Aspinall as the champion because he's willing to fight everyone. 5 current top 10 wins. If we're talking about pound for pound, one of the best, it's got to be Tom Aspinall. I mean, 5 current top 10 wins, all of them coming by way of first round finish. Undefeated in the UFC if you take away the injury to Curtis Blades. Shortest average fight time in the UFC. I think he's got the shortest strike in differential as well. And he's going to go out there and beat John Jones. So number 1, the best British fighter right now, it's got to be Tom Aspinall. He is the most skilled fighter we've ever seen from the UK, at least when it comes to the heavyweight division or like the heavier weight classes. So I'm going to go Tom Aspinall number 1. And this is my top 10 for the best British fighters. At in Brazil, so I say. At number 10 in Brazil, I'm going to go Gelton Almeida. I think he's going to be a future top contender in the welterweight, in the heavyweight division. I really do. I mean, he's got everything going for him apart from striking. He's ranked number 6th in the division. I mean, he's potentially one of the best heavyweight grapplers. I think if you take away John Jones, he could be one of the toughest tests for Tom Aspinall. He's already got a decent resume in the heavyweight division. He beat Derek Lewis, he beat Rosenstrike, he beat Alexander Romanov, and he was out wrestling Curtis Blades, which was impressive, obviously, until he got finished by him in the second round. But yeah, one of the best, most dominant grapplers in the heavyweight division right now. Future top contender. I kind of want to say champion material, but I don't think he beats Aspinall. But is anyone beating Aspinall these days? So number 10, I'm going to go Gelton Almeida. At number 9, I'm going Gilbert Burns. He has kind of fallen off a lot recently, but he was once one of the best welterweights in the world. And he's only really lost to the top guys. Look at his past couple of losses. You know, he lost to Jack Della Maddalena, top contender. Bilal Muhammad, champion. Usman, champion. Sean Brady, top 5 contender. So he's only losing to the top guys. He's ranked number 8th in the welterweight division as well, which, you know, he's still ranked. Some of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the UFC has Gilbert Burns got. One of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists, how many submissions he's got. And he's got some solid wins in the welterweight division. You know, if you look at his recent wins, submitted Neo Magny, beat Jorge Mazin. I mean, to be fair, those aren't the best wins, but he beat Woodley as well a couple of years ago. So he's got some solid wins at the welterweight division. And at the time of when he was beating them, it wasn't like they were necessarily bad wins as well. So number 8, Gilbert Burns. Number 9, Gilbert Burns. And number 8, I'm going Renato Moicano, one of the best personalities in the UFC right now. Ranked number 10 in the lightweight division, which is impressive. If you'd have told me a year and a half ago that Moicano was going to make it to the top 10 of the lightweight division, I would not have believed you. I don't think you can put him any higher because he has taken a couple of bad losses. Obviously got knocked out by Fiziev. He fought Dos Santos and he got completely battered. But he's on a roll right now. He's won 5 of his last 6, most of them coming by way of stoppage. Finished Jalen Turner, who else did he just recently beat as well? Finished Benoit Saint-Denis. Has got 3 ranked wins in the lightweight division as well. So I think you've got to give Moicano his credit. I don't think he's going to become a top contender. I don't think he's going to make it to the top 5 or anything crazy like that. I think in his next 2 fights, he will take a loss. But if we're talking about pound for pound, you've got to give Moicano his credit. Top 10 in the lightweight division. At number 7, I'm going Caio Borralho. Ranked number 6 in the middleweight division, so he's on a roll at middleweight. He's riding a huge winning streak. He's undefeated, I'm pretty sure, in the UFC as well. He might have lost. Has he lost once? I don't know if he's lost in the UFC, but he's riding a huge winning streak. Bullied Paul Craig, and that was when Paul Craig was ranked. Beat Jared Cannonier, nearly finished him as well in that 5th round as well. So 2 very impressive wins. Well, at least 1 very impressive win over Jared Cannonier. And I'd say he's a fight away from a title shot. Like I said, number 6 in the middleweight division. If you put him against somebody like maybe the loser of Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, or a Robert Whittaker, or I don't know, maybe an Imavov, whoever it may be, I think he's a fight away from a title shot. So Caio Borralho, top contender in the middleweight division, riding a huge winning streak. I'm going to go put him at number 7. At number 6, I'm going Jose Aldo. If you were to do a pound-for-pound list of all time, I think you've got to put Aldo at one of the top 3. I think he's got most longevity out of any UFC fighter. He was fighting back in the UFC and WEC over a decade ago, and he's still looking like a top bantamweight in 2024. He's got insane longevity. The featherweight greatest of all time, still competing as well in the bantamweight division. He's won 4 of his last 6, all of which are against ranked opponents. He's currently ranked number 11. A lot of people say he should be ranked higher because he kind of got robbed. Well, I don't think he necessarily got robbed, but he had a very controversial loss to Mario Batista. So Jose Aldo going at number 6. I don't mind if you put him any higher. And again, if you're going to do a pound-for-pound list of all time of longevity, Aldo's got to be in your top 3. At number 5, I'm going Diego Lopez. Ranked number 3 in the featherweight division. Likely going to be fighting for a belt. I know that there's a lot of rumours of Topuria moving up a weight class, but either way, whether Topuria stays at featherweight or moves up, you can't deny that Lopez is probably going to be fighting for a belt in his next fight. KO power on the feet, very hard hitter, great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 3 ranked wins in a row over Sadiq Youssef. Who else did he beat? Sadiq Youssef, Danny Ige, and Brian Ortega. So 3 impressive wins. So Diego Lopez, top featherweight contender, number 5. Number 4, I'm going to go Davison Figueiredo. Definitely one of the pound-for-pound best Brazilians in the UFC right now. He's a former champion, former multiple-time champion in the flyweight division. One of the best flyweights of all time, in my opinion. I think you've got to put him in the top 3 greatest flyweights of all time with the likes of Pantoja and obviously Demetrius Johnson. 3-1 in the bantamweight division, 2 of which were ranked fighters, and the other guy he finished in Cody Garbrandt. He had a super competitive fight against one of the best in the world in PTN. And I think he's one of the highest level fighters in the UFC. Like PTN and like Corey Sandhagen. Figueiredo's so tough, very slick on the feet, very powerful on the feet, and his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is on a completely different level. Most guys outside the top 5 he'd probably beat. I think he's going to stay in the top 5 of the bantamweight division for quite some time, so Figueiredo, one of the pound-for-pound undeniable best Brazilians right now, and put him in at number 4. At number 3, you've got to go Charles Oliveira. He's only lost to Islam Makhachev. If we're talking recently, he's only lost to Islam Makhachev, who's pound for pound the best fighter in the UFC, and he had a close fight to Arman Tsarukyan, who's going to be fighting for a belt next. If you call that washed, or if you want to discredit Oliveira for that, you got to be ashamed, man, because he is still one of the best lightweights in the world. Former champion, former defending champion as well. Ranked number 2 in the lightweight division, so he's probably a win away from a title shot. Might even get one in his next fight if Topuria doesn't end up moving up. Beat so many ranked lightweights, you know, Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler twice, Beneil Dariush, Tony Ferguson before Tony Ferguson was completely washed, Kevin Lee as well. So many ranked lightweights Charles Oliveira has beaten, and he's just one of the most dangerous fighters in the UFC, in my opinion. You know, he's got the most submissions in the UFC. He's one of the most dangerous guys in the UFC. I'd say he's probably the most dangerous in the lightweight division, even more, maybe not as dangerous as Makhachev, but at least up there with one of the most tough to beat fighters in the UFC. So Oliveira, I'm going to say that he gets it at number 3. Number 2, Alejandro Pantoja. Should be top 5 pound for pound, and I think a lot of people would agree. The greatest flyweight of this era. I know Demetrius Johnson's still the GOAT and everything, but if we're talking of this specific era, it's hard to deny Pantoja ever being the best in this complete era. I mean, he's completely cleared out the flyweight division. He's having to lap the division twice. Remember when Usman was a champion and Usman was having to beat people twice, and when, you know, Adesanya was having to beat people twice? Pantoja's done more than that. Pantoja has done a better job at clearing out his division than any champion in recent history, and he looks completely unstoppable. I say we let him move up to bantamweight after maybe one more flyweight win, because he looks completely unstoppable. One of the greatest flyweights of all time, maybe even top 2. So at number 2, definitely Pantoja. And number 1, I'm going to give it to Alex Pereira. Former middleweight champion, current light heavyweight champion, so he's been a champion in 2 weight classes, which is great when you're building a pound-for-pound list, and he's the defending champion. He's only 1 win away from clearing out the light heavyweight division, beating Jamal Hill, beating Yuri twice, beating Khalil Roundtree, beating Jan Blachowicz, multiple former champions on there. If he can beat Ankalaev, in my opinion, he's cleared out light heavyweight, and I don't even mind him moving to a 3rd weight class in heavyweight, and he's pound-for-pound top 3 in the UFC. It's hard to deny Porton, the best Brazilian fighter right now. So I'm going to put him at number 1, and that is my top 10 list. Brazil's definitely one of the best countries when it comes to competitive fighters in the UFC. Definitely have a bunch of killers, and that is my list. Then we move on to Russia. I'd say it's probably the toughest country when it comes to, well, the country that's producing the best fighters in the UFC, in my opinion, right now. At number 10, I'm going to go with Azamat Murzakanov. Now, I say this, and he's recently just been announced that he's been taking steroids, which is a scummy thing to do, so hopefully, you know, he gets kicked out the rankings or KO'd in his next fight, because it's a scummy thing to do. He's now been popped for steroids, but if we ignore the steroids, ranked number 11 in the light heavyweight division, and again, he was a potential in the light heavyweight division. You know, he was undefeated, never been beaten, had a KO win over Alonzo Menifield, he had a win over Dustin Jacoby, which obviously recently he's aged quite well. Solid boxer, great knockout power, very athletic for a short and chubby guy as well, was Azamat Murzakanov. I think he could have been a top contender in the light heavyweight division, had a lot of potential. So at number 10, I'm going to go with Azamat Murzakanov as the 10th best Russian fighter. At number 9, I'm going to go Sharaputin Magomedov. Now, do I think he's going to become a top contender? I don't. I think you put him against any semi-decent grappler, he probably loses, but he's ranked 14th in the middleweight division. Again, another undefeated fighter. We're going to see a theme with these Russian fighters that a lot of them are undefeated. I've never been beaten, undefeated. Solid kickboxer. Probably one of the best kickboxers in the middleweight division right now. That knockout over Arman Petrosian, one of the best in 2024. Super crafty with his strike, and I can't wait for him versus MVP. And like I said, probably won't be a top contender, but super fun to watch. You can't necessarily critique him for not being a top contender when he hasn't even fought the top guys yet. So, number 9, I'm going Sharon Magomedov. At number 8, I'm going Sergey Pavlovich. This dude, the aura that this guy had, I know aura is a bit of a cringy word these days, but the aura that Sergey Pavlovich had pre-Tom Aspinall fight, he was the scariest fighter in the UFC, and he still is one of the scariest fighters on the roster because of just how good, how accurate he is with his hands, how long his reach is, and most importantly, how powerful this dude is. He's ranked number 4th in the heavyweight division. I still think he's got potential to build himself back up. He might not be the most technical. You know, a guy like Aspinall, a guy like Volkov, a guy like Garner will probably outclass him. but he's still pound for pound the best brawler in the UFC. If you're brawler with Sergey Pavlovich, you're getting put to sleep. And he's got some solid wins. Beat Curtis Blades, which is an amazing win in the heavyweight division. Finished Derek Lewis. Finished Tati Wivasa, was previously riding on a 6-fight first-round knockout streak. So Sergey Pavlovich is going number 8 for one of the best Russians in the UFC. At number 7 is his former rival, former friend, Alexander Volkov. He should be on a 5-fight winning streak, should Volkov. I think he should have beaten Garn, the biggest robbery of 2024. So he should have beaten Cyril Garn. He should be on a 5-fight winning streak right now, fighting for a belt. Or at least fighting the winner of Tom Aspinall, John George, should I say. And he's got a really impressive heavyweight resume. He's beaten a ton of ranked heavyweights across multiple different generations. He's not like a Sergey Pavlovich who's just made a name for himself this year, or last year. He's been around the heavyweight division for quite some time. Ranked number 3, I think he should be ranked number 2, and he's a permanent top contender. He's never not been a top contender in the featherweight division. So at number 7, I'm going to go Alexander Volkov for being the 7th best Russian. At number 6, I'm going Umar Nurmagomedov. You might be thinking it's quite low down, but if we're being real, he has only got one ranked win, and it's Corey Sandhagen. Again, that win over Corey Sandhagen was super impressive, so that's why I'm putting him up at number 6. But he hasn't got this long resume. He's only got one good win, but he is going to be fighting for a belt in his next fight, and I do think he beats Merab. He is undefeated at 18-0. He is ranked number 2 in the bantamweight division, the most competitive in the UFC, and for that reason, I've got to give Umar Nurmagomedov his props. He's the 6th best Russian in my opinion, and like I said, I do think he beats Merab, but he has only beaten Sandhagen. Number 5, I'm going Movsar Evloev. Ranked number 4th in the featherweight division, but he's got a bunch of good ranked wins as well. He's got 4 ranked wins. Former champion Aljamain Sterling, a competitive fight with Arnold Allen, Diego Lopez, who's now a top contender, a win over Dan Ige as well. So 4 ranked wins is impressive for a top contender in Evloev. Again, another undefeated fighter. And he probably fights for a belt in a fight or two. It wouldn't surprise me if he fights for a belt in his next fight, maybe above Diego Lopez, or maybe against Diego Lopez. Well, it won't be against Diego Lopez, but maybe one more win or a couple of fights away, Movsar Evloev is going to be getting a title shot. Ranked number 4, so at number 5, I'm going to give Movsar Evloev. He is pound for pound one of the best. At number 4, I'm going Magomed Ankalaev. Ranked number 1 in the light heavyweight division. Some would say he's the toughest test, and I agree that he is the toughest test for Alex Pereira. Should be fighting for a belt in his next fight, in my opinion, against Alex Pereira. I would make an argument to say that he should have been a former champion and he should have beaten Jan Blachowicz, but the judges obviously scored it a draw. A handful of ranked wins. Him and Poaton combined have completely cleared out the top 10 of the light heavyweight division apart from Carlos Ulberg, which just shows you how many guys Ankalaev has beaten as well. And his only loss is to Paul Craig a few years ago, when if he'd have lasted one more second, he would have won the fight. So at number 4, as the 4th best Russian, I'm going with potential future champion Magomed Ankalaev. And now we're in the top 3. At 3rd, I'm going Peter Yan. Probably pound for pound, one of the most skilled fighters in the UFC right now. Former bantamweight champion, ranked top 3 in the most competitive division, and he probably is going to be fighting for a belt in a fight or two. Some would say if Umar Nurmagomedov beats Merab, they might do Peter Yan versus Umar, or maybe you do Peter Yan versus O'Malley number 2 for a number 1 contender fight. Either way, he's a fight away from a title shot, and some would say he should have beaten O'Malley too. And like I said, one of the most skilled fighters on the roster. Great underrated wrestling. One of the best boxers, if not the best boxer in the UFC. Great chin. Very, very technical. You can't not like Peter Yan. Such a fun and technical style to watch. So at number 3, I'm going Peter Yan for the best Russian. At number 2, Khamzat Chimaev. He's one of the most dominant fighters on the roster. If we talk about dominant wrestlers in history of the UFC, obviously, you think of the likes of Cain Velasquez and Khabib. You've got to put Chimaev in that conversation as well. He's so dominant. He doesn't have time to waste. He doesn't have to set up his takedowns with strikes. You know exactly what's coming and nobody can stop it. Solid resume. Completely mauled Robert Whittaker in that first round. Out-wrestled Usman in that first round. Beat Gilbert Burns in a scrap. Ragdolled Kevin Holland like it was nothing. Solid resume. Undefeated. Never lost a fight. Fighting for a belt with his next fight, or at least he should be. I think it's pretty stupid to say that he doesn't fight the winner of Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. So, at number 2, I'm going to go Khamzat Chimaev as the 2nd best Russian on the roster, and I would be very confident in saying that this guy's a future champion. And at number 1, it's got to be Islam Makhachev. I mean, not only is he the best Russian, but he's the best in the world. Pound for pound, number 1. I would favour him against every single possible opponent. Whether you're talking about a guy like Tapori moving up, I favour Makhachev. Whether you talk about any 155er, I favour Islam Makhachev. Even if you talk about Makhachev potentially moving up and facing Bilal Muhammad, I'd still favour Islam Makhachev. There isn't a single possible opponent that he could fight that I probably wouldn't favour him against. So, I'm going to go Makhachev for pound for pound, number 1. One of the all-time greats as well. I think he's already made it to the top 10. Some would even argue top 5. And he's unstoppable. I really can't see him losing, unless it's like an Usman loss where he dominates the fight and then takes a bad shot and gets knocked out. I think he's unstoppable in the lightweight division. So, number 1, the best Russian on the roster has to be Islam Makhachev. And this is my top 10 for the Russians. Again, Russians, most of them are undefeated, and most of them do seem to be taking over the UFC. Probably the best fighters that we've got in the UFC right now. And then we've got Mexico. Now, Mexico's not as competitive as the others, so I'm going to be kind of going over them quite quickly. But at number 10, we've got Edgar Chairez. He survived Joshua Van at UFC Mexico, UFC 306. And he also survived Tatsuro Taira, which is quite impressive because when Taira was on his come-up, he was finishing everyone. And he's finished every one of his wins. He's got 100% finishing rate in his wins, so he's a very dangerous fighter as Edgar Chairez. And again, he lost to Joshua Van and Tatsuro Taira, two of some of the top flyweights in the world right now. So at number 10, I'm going to go Edgar Chairez for being the 10th best Mexican. At number 9, I'm going Raul Rosas Jr. He's only really hyped up because of his age and his stupid post-fight interviews, but he's got impressive skill for his age. You've got to give him credit. I mean, how old is he now? 20 years old? He's got the record for the youngest fighter in UFC history, and to say that he is that young, he has got impressive skill. He's 4-1 in the UFC with 3 of them coming by way of finish too. So, he's had a pretty good UFC run so far. He's, got a couple of knockouts on there, got a lot of submissions. Has potential. I do think he's got potential. Obviously, he's only a young guy. He's got potential to grow. But I do think he struggles with getting into the rankings. I would not confidently say that Raul Rosas Jr. would make it into the rankings in the future. So I'll put him at number 9 for now. I think it's the safe option. Number 9, Raul Rosas Jr. And number 8, we've got Jesus Aguilar. Ronaldo Rodriguez is next. But number 8, we've got Jesus Aguilar. 4-1 in the UFC with his only loss being Tatsuro Taira, who's now a top 5 flyweight potential future champion. And I think he's got a lot of potential in the flyweight division, just Jesus Aguilar. Very dangerous fighter, great grappling, very good on the feet. I think his last fight was at UFC 305 where he got a win, and it was impressive there as well. So Jesus Aguilar, very impressive, very well-rounded, very dangerous. And you can't, again, shame him for losing to Tatsuro Taira. At number 7, Ronaldo Rodriguez. He's probably a win away from fighting in the rankings of the flyweight division. Now, granted, the flyweight division is extremely shallow, but he is probably a win away from fighting in there. Got a really good win over Odi Osborne at UFC 306, which I didn't expect him to win. And he has looked impressive in his past few fights. I know he lost in the Contender Series a few years ago, but he has been looking impressive in his past few. He is well-rounded. He's got pretty good stand-up, and he's a solid grappler. Huge star as well. He's got like over 1 million followers on Instagram. This guy's a massive star in Mexico. I don't know how he is. I don't know what he does, but huge star. Ronaldo Rodriguez, number 7. At number 6, I'm going Manuel Torres. He was once a huge lightweight prospect. He was once riding a 4-fight winning streak with all of them coming by way of first-round stoppages. So he was once a huge lightweight prospect. Very, very dangerous as well as Manuel Torres. I mean, on the ground, he's got great jiu-jitsu. He hits like a truck on the feet too. Still has tons of potential in the lightweight division, and I'd say he's only one decision. Oh yeah, he's only got one decision out of 15 wins in his career. So out of all of his 15 wins, only one of them has gone by way of decision, which again just shows how dangerous he is. So Manuel Torres still got potential to turn his career back around, still got potential to pick up a win, and I will say, yeah, he has got potential, and he's number 6 out of the 6 best Mexican. At number 5, I'm going Daniel Zeluba. He just had the best fight of 2024. We got to give him credit. Him and Esteban Ribovic just put in the best fight of 2024 in a fight that could have gone either way. I do personally think that Ribovic won, but I would not have been mad if Zeluba had won that fight. He's won 4 of his 6 UFC fights. Both of the losses were close as well. It isn't like he got dominated or finished. Both of the losses were close. And he still has a ton of potential at 155. He's a young guy, very good striker, very tough as he just showed in his last fight. So again, Daniel Zeluba, potential, number 5. And number 4, I'm going Kelvin Gastelum. Now, I know he kind of represents the USA, but listen, he also represents Mexico, and considering Mexico is quite shallow when it comes to talent, I'm going to include Gastelum. Former title challenger in the middleweight division. Gave Izzy his toughest fight, or at least his toughest win anyway, where he absolutely put in a scrap against Israel Adesanya, made him look like his face had been, I don't know, just completely battered his face after that fight. Former top contender in the middleweight division as well, has some great wins, beat former champion Marco Bisping, retired him. Probably the best unranked welterweight. I know he's just been announced to be fighting Joe Piper at middleweight, but if we're talking in the welterweight division, he's probably the best guy unranked in that division. And he could make it back into the rankings with a win over Joe Piper or another win in the welterweight division. He probably makes it back into the rankings. So at number 4, I'm going to go with former title challenger Kelvin Gastelum. In the top 3, number 3, I'm going Alex Perez. This dude just completely had a surge of activity. He was once one of the most inactive fighters in the UFC, pulling out of every fight. And then this year, suddenly, for the first half of the year, he just fought 3 times and became super active. But now he's kind of fallen off again. Ranked number 7 in the flyweight division, which is impressive. It's super competitive. Gave Makayev a tough fight early this year, and he knocked out Mateus Nicolau. That could have been partially the reason why Nicolau got cut from the UFC. He won 7 out of his first 8 UFC fights, so he had a great start to his career. And again, he's only lost to top flyweights. You look at his losses on his career, it's to the best in the world. It's to, potential future champions. It's the top 5 contenders, so it isn't losing to bums. So Alex Perez, I'm going to put him at number 7. Hasn't really fought a lot of the current top 15 in the flyweight division, but he's still one of the best, and I'm putting him at number 3. Number 2, I'm going Yair Rodriguez. Top 5 in the featherweight division. Had some good wins. That last-second knockout over Korean Zombie. Submitted Josh Emmett for the interim belt. Obviously, like I said, former interim champion, which is impressive. Beat Jeremy Stevens as well. Beat Dan Hooker as well. So I'm going to go Yair Rodriguez. And he's still a top contender in the 145 division. Now, do I think he wins a belt? I don't. I think Topuria beats him. Volkanovski's already finished him. He's already lost to Max Holloway as well. He's already been submitted by Yair Rodriguez. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a future champion. But there's still a lot of competitive fights. And I can't sit here and say that he necessarily leaves the top 5. I think him versus Arnold Allen would be a great fight. So Yair Rodriguez, the former interim champion, I'm going to put him at number 2. At number 1, it's got to be Brandon Moreno. Former multiple-time flyweight champion. He's the only Mexican to become an actual champion when it comes to the men. Ranked number 2 in the flyweight division, and I would not be surprised if he gets a title fight in his next fight. I know they've got Manel Kape versus Brandon Royval. It wouldn't surprise me if they do Moreno versus Pantoja 4. He has wins over Davis and Figueiredo, one of the greatest flyweights of all time. Kai Kara of France. Amir Albazi just schooled him recently, and he beat Brandon Royval a couple of years ago too. So he's got some really impressive wins against top flyweights. And he's been a top 3 flyweight for years now. He's always been a top 3 flyweight as Brandon Moreno. So at number 1, the best Mexican, I'm going to go Brandon Moreno, and I don't think you can really disagree with that. So this is my list of Mexicans. Not necessarily the most competitive when it comes to the countries, especially when you compare like the Mexicans in boxing compared to the UFC. But, you know, we've still got a few former champions on there. Still got a lot of tough guys. So I'm going to go with, well, at least Brandon Moreno being the best Mexican. Then I'm going to combine New Zealand and Australia. I know a lot of people get frustrated when I combine them both. You know, it's like comparing England and Ireland. It's like comparing USA and Canada, but I can't be bothered making 2 separate lists for a flag that looks the same, people who sound the same, people who fight the same. They're the same thing in my eyes. I'm counting them both as the same thing. At number 10, I'm going Cody Haddon. Very solid grappler is Cody Haddon. Got a good grappling base. He has that dog in him as well. He recently won. I forgot which card it was, but he recently won in an Apex Fight Night, and he looked pretty impressive, and he went for an absolute scrap in that fight. He's got potential in the flyweight division. If he just sharpens up a little bit, I think he's got potential. 2-0 in the UFC and the Contender Series, and he got a finish on the Contender Series too. So at number 10, I'm going to go with Cody Haddon being the best from, I don't even know where he's from, either Australian or New Zealand. At number 9, I'm going Jake Matthews, veteran, probably the biggest veteran from Australia. 13-7 in the UFC. I know that's not like a perfect record, but you know, he's had some good wins. He beat Andre Fialho, he beat Diego Sanchez, Li Jingliang, Phil Rowe recently, so he's had some good wins. And he's a solid journeyman as well. He's one of these guys that he's never going to make it into the rankings. He's never going to be like a top unranked welterweight, but he's always going to be one of these guys that can pick up a win every now and then against guys that ain't on his level. So he's a solid journeyman. And Michael Morales, this big prospect in the welterweight division who's undefeated, he gave Michael Morales his toughest fight. He made Michael Morales work for that win, gave him his toughest fight in the UFC. So I'm going to put Jake Matthews at number 9. Respectable journeyman. I'm going to put him at number 9. At number 8, I'm going to go Taito Ivaza, ranked number 11 in the heavyweight division, so he's still ranked. But again, if he was in any other division, he would be unranked. This guy was 1 win away from fighting John Jones, which is crazy. Had he gone for the finish against Cyril Gane, he would have beaten John Jones, which is, well, he would have fought, should I say, John Jones, which is a crazy thing to think about. 7 knockout wins in the UFC, including obviously an infamous knockout over Derek Lewis. But you can't really put him anything higher than number 8 when he's got the same amount of wins in the UFC as he has losses. One of the most streaky fighters in the UFC. So at number 8, I'm going to go Taito Ivaza. The shameful thing is, if he loses one more fight, he's probably going to get cut from the UFC, which I don't want to see that happen to a guy as entertaining as Tuivasa. So hopefully he can pull a win off, but yeah, we need to give him somebody unranked, in my opinion. Give him like a Martin Badai, I'm not sure. But number 8 is Tuivasa. Number 7, Steve Erceg. Ranked number 9 in the flyweight division. Gave Pantoja his toughest title fight yet, or maybe Moreno did that when he fought for the belt, but to say that this guy was ranked number 10th in the flyweight division when he was fighting Pantoja, and he gave Pantoja, the best flyweight in the world, his toughest title fight yet, he's super impressive. He did better than Brandon Royval. He did better than Kaya Sakura. He's done better than a lot of other flyweights, so you've got to give him credit for that. But he is a Kai Kara France victim. He got completely brutally knocked out by Kai Kara France. And his best win is Matt Schnell, which is still a good win. He did knock out Matt Schnell in a fight that he was dominating early this year, but when your best win is Matt Schnell and you're ranked number 9, I can't really put you anything above number 7. So at number 7, I'm going to go Steve Erceg. At number 6, I'm going Carlos Ulberg, ranked number 6 in the light heavyweight division, potentially the next big thing in the light heavyweight division. If we're talking about prospects at light heavyweight, he's probably the biggest prospect right now. Well, he's not even a prospect anymore. He's like a contender now. He's got ranked wins over Volkan Oezdemir, which was impressive, and finished Alonzo Menifield in, I think it was 12 seconds. 8-1 in the UFC, with 6 of them coming by way of stoppages. So Carlos Ulberg, great potential at light heavyweight, top contender, ranked number 6. He's getting number 6 on this list too. Number 5, I'm going to go with Dan Hooker. Also ranked number 6 in the lightweight division. I still can't believe he's ranked number 6 as well. Like, Dan Hooker a few years ago was on this big losing streak, and he wasn't really able to pick up a few wins or go on a winning streak. And now that he's in the top 6 of the lightweight division, I find that crazy. He's fought the best competition you can get, like Dustin Poirier, Islam Makhachev, Mateus Gamrot when Gamrot was on a winning streak as well. This guy just consistently fights the best competition you can possibly fight. Never rejects a fight. He has wins over Gamrot, which is super impressive. Jalin Turner, Paul Felder, Nasrat Haqparast, Gilbert Burns, Jim Miller. So he's got a lot of good wins in the lightweight division. And he's tough as nails. One of the toughest fighters in the UFC. Always up for a dogfight is Dan Hooker. That's where he does his best. So at number 5, I'm going to go with one of the most entertaining Australians, Dan Hooker. At number 4, I'm going Jack Del Madlena. Ranked number 4 in the welterweight division. Top contender, probably a fight or two away from a title shot. A knockout winner for Gilbert Burns, which is impressive. Beat Kevin Holland. Beat Randy Brown. Knocked out Randy Brown as well, which is impressive because Brown's probably the best or one of the best unranked welterweights. So he's got some decent wins. I'd say he's probably one of the best boxers in the UFC. And definitely the best boxer in the welterweight division. Undefeated in the UFC on a huge winning streak. So Jack Del Madlena, potential future champion. I know a lot of people think he could be Bilal Muhammad. So I'll put him at number 4. At number 3, top 3 best Australians. In the 3rd place, I'm going Kai Kara France. Also ranked number 4 in the flyweight division. One of the best flyweights on earth. And I think out of all the flyweights right now, he probably has the best chance, either him or Manel Kape, of beating Pantoja. He has wins over Steve Erceg, where he knocked out Erceg after Erceg nearly beat Pantoja. He's beat Askar Askarov, another impressive win. Knocked out Cody Garbrandt. Should have beaten Albazi as well. I know he lost to Albazi, but most people would have made the argument to say that he should have won that fight. Probably fighting for a belt in his next fight. Like I said before, the announcement Manel Kape versus Royval, which kind of assumes that Kai Kara France is going to be fighting Pantoja next. And his only losses are to champion quality fighters. Like I said, Brandon Moreno, Pantoja, these are the guys that he's losing to. Brandon Royval, he's losing to champion quality fighters. So at number 3, the 3rd best Australian, I'm going to go with Kai Kara France. At number 2, Robert Whittaker. Yeah, ranked number 4 in the middleweight division. Former champion, the first former champion on this list. Beat most contenders at middleweight. We talked about earlier how Holloway was always the second best and Volkanovski was always the first best. Well, that was the case for a lot of the time in the middleweight division where Izzy was the best. And Whittaker was the second best. He was beating everyone, no matter who you put him against. He was always the number 1 guy behind Izzy in the middleweight division. Schooling every contender you put him against. Now, he's not necessarily champion quality anymore. You know, he's taken a few losses to Izzy, got finished by Dricus du Plessis, got mauled by Chimaev. So I can't sit here and say that he's a future champion. But he's still one of the best in the world. Still a top contender in the middleweight division. Still a top 5 fighter. And one of the best in the world. Similar to Dustin Poirier. Not Dustin Poirier. Well, not necessarily Dustin Poirier, but similar to a lot of fighters. One of the best non-champions in the UFC right now. So I'm going to put him at number 2. And at number 1, it's got to be Volkanovski. Ranked number 1 in the featherweight division. Former champion with multiple title defenses. I'd go out and say that he's one of the greatest featherweights of all time. Owned the featherweight division for literal years. Like from 2019 basically till 2024. Well, maybe not 2024, but 2023. Volkanovski had the featherweight division on hold. Completely owned the division, beating literally every contender he put him against. Had a competitive fight with Makhachev, who's pound for pound number 1, where a lot of people would have argued that Volkanovski should have won that fight. And he's one of the all-time greats. If Volkanovski isn't in your top 5 list, or at least your top 10 of the greatest of all time, what are you doing? Volkanovski number 1, the best Australian. So that's my list between Australia and New Zealand, between the best. Again, there's a bunch of fun fighters to come from this area of the world. Volk, Whittaker, Kai Kara France, JDM. Most of them tend to be fun fighters and fun strikers as well. So I'm going to put Australia, New Zealand. Number 1 is Volkanovski, without a doubt. Then for Georgia, now, I'm going to do a top 5 for Georgia and for some of these other countries just because they haven't even got 10 fighters in the UFC that I can make a top 10 with. So the rest of the countries I'm going to do top 5. At number 5, I'm going to go with Guram Kutateladze. Very high-level grappler, trains with the likes of Khamzat Chimaev. Very good, solid grappler. Beat Jordan Vucenic, who's another good grappler in his most recent fight. Beat Mateus Gamrot in his debut, which is a really good, impressive win. It was a split decision, but he still got the win over Gamrot. And I think he's got a lot of potential at 155. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's like future champion material or one of the best unranked lightweights, but he has got a lot of potential. He looked really good in his last fight against Jordan Vucenic. He's tough as nails, hits very hard, good grappler. So at number 5, I'm going to go Guram Kutateladze as the 5th best Georgian. Number 4, I'm going Roman Dolidze. Ranked top 10 in the middleweight division. Has wins over Anthony Smith, which is impressive. He fought Smith on short notice in a completely different division and beat Anthony Smith as well. Beat Kevin Holland, and I know it was an injury, but he was probably going to win that fight anyway. And also beat Jack Hermansson by stoppage. 77% finish rate, so he's a very dangerous fighter as Roman Dolidze. A lot of TKOs in his resume. And he's only lost to top 5 contenders. You know, he lost to Imavov, who's a top 5 contender, lost to Marvin Vettori, who at the time was a top 5 contender. So he's only losing to top guys as Roman Dolidze. So I'm going to put him at number 4 as the 4th best Georgian. At number 3, I'm going Giga Chikadze. Ranked number 12 in the featherweight division. High-level kickboxer, comes from Glory Kickboxing. He's got some good wins. Edson Barboza, another great kickboxer who's got a win over Cub Swanson, Alex Caceres. You put this guy against a lot of strikers a lot of the time, apart from the likes of Calvin Kattar. He gets to win over him. Now, we did lose to Calvin Kattar, like I said, in a pretty dominant fight, but he had a close fight with Arnold Allen at UFC 304, who's another top contender. So, Giga Chikadze, ranked in the featherweight division, great striker, probably stays ranked for a while. I will put him at number 3 as the 3rd best Georgian. Number 2, it's going to be Arman Tsarukyan. Fighting for about, I know he kind of represents multiple countries. He represents Russia, he represents Armenia, but he also is from Georgia, and he is ranked number 1 in the lightweight division. Some great wins already. Beating Charles Oliveira, I thought he won that fight, and beating Oliveira, the only guy apart from Makhachev to beat Oliveira, super impressive. Knocked out Beneil Dariush. Beat Yoel Alvarez, who's now ranked as well, completely mauled Alvarez. Beat Matt Frevola too, so he's got some really good wins in the lightweight division. His only loss is a robbery to Gamrot, where he should have won that fight, which should be another name on his resume. And Islam Makhachev, another competitive fight in his debut. And he's going to be fighting for a belt in his next bout. I don't think he beats Makhachev, and there's no shame in that because he's pound for pound number 1. But he could go out there and do it. So Tsarukyan, without a doubt, in my opinion, number 2 for the Georgians. And number 1 has to be Merab. Bantamweight champion, has wins over former champion Sean O'Malley, former champion Henry Cejudo, former champion PTN, former champion Jose Aldo, and Michael Morales. So he's got a really, really good resume in the bantamweight division. He's riding an 11-fight winning streak right now. Pound for pound top 10 in the UFC as well. So Merab, without a doubt, is the best Georgian right now in the UFC. Like I said, riding a big winning streak, great resume, champion, the only Georgian champion right now, undoubtedly number 1. So that is my top 5 for the 5 best Georgians in the UFC. Even though there's only a few Georgians in the UFC, the Georgians tend to be tough, they tend to be really skilled. So I'm going to put Merab at number 1. Then for France, at number 5 for France, I'm going to William Gomez. He's probably one of the best unranked featherweights right now. I think he's a win away from getting it into the rankings. He's on a 12-fight winning streak, this huge winning streak in MMA. He beat you Anderson Brito, who I previously said was the best unranked featherweight. I know it was a very controversial fight in which Brito should have won, but he still got the win and made it competitive against you Anderson Brito. And like I said, 1 win away from fighting in the rankings. Great kickboxer, very fast on the feet. Very tough to beat on the feet as well. He looked great against Brito. So William Gomez, in my opinion, is the 5th best fighter from France, and I'm going to put him at number 5. At number 4, I'm going to go with Benoit Saint-Denis. You're probably looking at this thinking, why is Benoit Saint-Denis so low? I would have put him in the top 2, and I'll explain why when I talk about the other guys. But I'm going to put him at number 4. Ranked number 12 in the lightweight division, even though I don't think that's necessarily earned. He had a competitive first round against Dustin Poirier, where he was beating Poirier in that first round. He was taking him down, took his back multiple times, threatened a lot of submissions. Was even doing better on the feet in that first round against Dustin Poirier. So the fact that he actually was competitive against Poirier is impressive. He was riding a 5-fight winning streak of all finishes, including a great knockout over Matt Frevola, which got him into the rankings. But ultimately, the reason I put him at number 4 is because he has been finished by Dustin Poirier, and he has been finished by Renato Moicano. And even though those are top lightweights as well, or at least in the rankings, all he's done is beat Matt Frevola. He hasn't got a win over a single ranked lightweight right now, so I'm going to have to put Benoit Saint-Denis at number 4. He has also lost early in his UFC career to Zaleski dos Santos in the welterweight division. So, number 4, Benoit Saint-Denis. And number 3, I'm going with Fares Ziam. I think Fares Ziam is the better French lightweight than Benoit Saint-Denis. I'd go out there and say he's probably the best unranked lightweight right now. Beat Matt Frevola in a somehow more brutal way than Benoit Saint-Denis. And what made that impressive was he was dominating Matt Frevola on the feet. He was dominating Matt Frevola with the grappling, and then knocks him out with one of those brutal knockouts this year with a knee to the jaw, put him in unconscious. 6-2 in the UFC, has potential in the lightweight division. I hope he gets a ranked fight next. I forgot who he's fighting. I don't think he's fighting a ranked fight next, but I hope whoever he fights next can get him into the rankings. So, at number 3, I'm going to go with Fares Ziam, one of the best Frenchmen in the UFC and somebody to look out for. At number 2, I'm going Cyril Gane, former interim champion in the heavyweight division. Ranked number 2, waste of potential, waste of talent, but he has got some good wins. He's got a win over Alexander Volkov, Derek Lewis, Sergey Spivak, Tartu Ivaza, Rosenstrike. He was bullied by John Jones. He was bullied by Francis Ngannou, and he did rob Alexander Volkov in his most recent fight, as well as being completely one-dimensional. But you can't deny Cyril Gane nearly cleared out a lot of these well, definitely not cleared out, but he's got wins over a bunch of heavyweights, former champion, fought for the belt on multiple different occasions, always been a top heavyweight. So Cyril Gane is going number 2 in my opinion. At number 1 is Nassourdine Imavov. He kind of represents Dagestan and France, but he also is French. He's from France, so I'm going to put Imavov at number 1. He's won 6 of his last 7 fights. He's got wins over Roman Dolidze, Brendan Allen, which was impressive because Allen was on a streak, Jared Cannonier by stoppage, and Buckley. He's only lost to Phil Hawes, who was once a huge prospect, and Sean Strickland by decision, obviously former champion. And he's probably 1 win away from a title shot. He's booked against Israel Adesanya. I don't think he beats Izzy, but if he can beat Israel Adesanya, he's going to be fighting for a belt. So the fact that Imavov's in that stage of his career, I think puts him at number 1. But that is my top 5 for France. I think you've got to give France their credit. They've got some decent... Actually, no, don't give France their credit. They usually produce bums. They've not really... To be fair, to say how big and popular of a country France is, they really don't produce that many good fighters. I mean, you've got Garn and Imavov, but apart from that, Imavov's half Dagestani as well, so shame on you, France. Anyway, Canada next. Canada is, again, similar to France, one of the most disappointing countries when it comes to producing talent. Number 5, Marc-Andre Barriol. He's top 5 for Canadians. He tends to lose to these very powerful or high-level strikers like a Joe Pyfer or a Dustin Stoltzfus or a Chris Curtis, so he only loses to great, powerful strikers. He's had a few good wins in the UFC in his career, and he's a decent journeyman for Canada standards. You know, he's a decent journeyman. I don't think he's going to end up getting cut from the UFC, but he's just a decent journeyman. There's not really much to say about Marc-Andre Barriol. Canada doesn't produce the best fighters, and he's an example of that. Number 4, I'm going to go Kyle Nelson. He's won 3 of his last 4 fights. He actually had a draw with Doo Ho Choi, which is impressive because Doo Ho Choi looked absolutely amazing since he's come back to the UFC. And he's completely turned his career as well, career around as Kyle Nelson. He started off in a shaky UFC, or a shaky start to his UFC career, taking a bunch of losses, but he's now turned his career around. Managed to get, like I said, with 3 of his last 4 won. And he's a solid guy as Kyle Nelson. Apparently he was booked to be fighting Calvin Kattar, which I'm not sure he's necessarily earned, and I don't think he wins that fight either, but he's got potential. I'm going to put Kyle Nelson at number 4. At number 3 is Charles Jourdain. Really crafty kickboxer with decent submissions. He's a good fighter to watch, Charles Jourdain. Really crafty with his kickboxing, great kicker, decent submission ability as well. So he's quite talented everywhere the fight goes. He looked really good against Kyle Nelson. Not Kyle Nelson, Victor Hugo, that's a typo. He looked really good against Victor Hugo at UFC Canada, not Kyle Nelson. In his most recent fight where I think he moved down to the bantamweight division. So he did look really good. And he loses to talented fighters. It's not like he's losing to bums. I mean, you look at his most recent losses. Nathaniel Wood, like I already said before, one of the best British fighters. Gene Silver, the best unranked featherweight. So he loses to talented guys. And he's still someone to look out for. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's like this big prospect, but he's still somebody to keep your eye on, especially since he's moved to the bantamweight division. So at number 3, I'm going Charles Jourdain. At number 2, I'm going to go Mike Mallet. Probably Canada's best prospect right now. If you're talking in terms of Canadian prospects, Mike Mallett's your best chance. He's 5-1 in the UFC with 4 finishes, which is impressive. He's got a couple of knockouts and a lot of submissions on there. His only loss is a ranked Neil Magny, so he's only lost to a ranked fighter in a fight that he was dominating. Had he lasted 12 more seconds, he would have won that fight. And I think he will probably make it to the rankings eventually. He did look quite uneventful in his most recent fight, but I think he's got potential to make it to the rankings. So I'll put Mike Mallet at number 2, while number 1 is Mr. Ariel Helwani, Ayman Zahabi. Ranked 13th, so he's the only guy from Canada right now who's ranked. Ranked 13th in the bantamweight division, 5-fight winning streak. He's got some good wins as well. He beat Pedro Munoz. He beat Javid Bashrat, took away that undefeated O from him. And he's completely turned his career around. He's got a new team. He's got a bunch of good coaches. And he seems to have a lot of potential right now in the bantamweight division. Like I said, 5-fight winning streak, ranked, great kickboxer. So the best Canadian fighter, in my opinion, is Ayman Zahabi. That would be my what if every country had a pound-for-pound ranking. Let me know if you agree or disagree with this list, if you agree with these rankings, if you'd have added any more countries, switched the placements around. Let me know your thoughts and your opinions, and thank you for watching.